Hey y'all, it's Alexis from Ask Alexis here, and we have a really cool, awesome guest on the comfy couch today. This is Wendy Ibraham, and she is from Third Space International. Now, let me tell y'all what she does, okay? So, she is an anti Muslim discrimination educator because, as y'all have been learning about the US, America, discrimination can be our business. And when we do it, business is good. So, um, us world builders out here, share future or bust, are doing things like advocating for love and compassion and anti oppressive techniques. Now, I don't know if you've noticed already that Wendy happens to be a fairer skinned Muslim woman, or as she says, white. Uh, oh, sorry, I made myself laugh there. And oh, I forgot to ask y'all, like, subscribe, and share. Turn on the notification bell in order to receive updates for our weekly show. I'm getting better with my team, so you might be getting notifications or clips or things like that. I'm trying to, grow, right? What is this? I don't have, so just cheer me on for that, and then don't come for me. Um, and so, yes, Wendy, thank you for coming and joining us on the comfy couch. How are
Uh,
you?
I'm glad to be here on the comfy couch. This is fun already. Thank you so much. I'm doing well.
Well, thank you. I'm glad. Fun is what we try to do, since sometimes we talk about pretty heavy topics.
Yes.
It,
Yes.
it is the work can be heavy. And so, like, you need resets for your nervous system, you need time in your liberated space, you need to feel free in your being.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, what would you like me to tell your listeners?
Well, I was just about to ask, would you like to start with talking about your work or your journey as a white Muslim woman?
Which is interesting to people, isn't it? Like, how the heck did that happen?
Or do like
Well, my
hand in hand?
well, right, and my work and my faith practice are so intertwined. It's really kind of hard for me to separate out.
Completely
Because
understand that my work and faith practice are intertwined too.
right, yeah. So I mean, to me, anti-racism work feels like sacred work. Justice work is sacred work, and it's all about anchoring into like the best version of yourself and radiating that out. So that's what it feels like for me. Um, yeah, so I'm Muslim. I converted to Islam, let me see, 23 years ago now. So it's been a while,
You
and
said
I
it
was
when it wasn't popular.
back when it wasn't
I mean,
popular.
I
Yeah,
know
there
that
was
it's
nothing.
popular now, but I was just saying
But yeah,
something that
it wasn't a TikTok trend back then to become Muslim. Um, yeah, so I had the opportunity. I'd finished graduate school. I studied organizational development, and I got an opportunity to go to Cairo, Egypt, and teach organizational development there, undergraduate, graduate. It was an awesome career opportunity. But from the time I was a child, I'd always wanted to go to Egypt from fifth grade social studies class. I'm like, I'm going to go see those hieroglyphics, going to go see the pyramids. I was very focused on ancient Egyptian history, didn't really
brother is
care.
like that. He was like that. All like to the point we'll be like, shut up.
I was into it without even being asked by my teacher. I wrote a play about farming on the Nile and came to him with it. And I was like, I wrote a play about farming on the Nile. And he let the class put it on for all the younger grades. So I was indulged in my Egypt love. So fast forward to being in my early 30s, I was like, I get to go to Egypt. Like, someone's going to pay me to go to Egypt? Absolutely. And I've always been sort of very kind of hippy dippy in my values. I was living in Seattle at the time, and I worked with homeless people, and I really was all about like love and care and openness and everybody's equal and all of this stuff. And
Kindred
so
spirits, Wendy. We are kindred spirits.
when we were having my goodbye dinner, when everyone was sending me off to Cairo, a good friend of mine said, I think you're going to meet someone there and get married. And I was like, absolutely not. And he's like, why are you so sure? And I'm like, because they're Muslim. And he was like, oh, listen to you. So open-minded, everybody's equal. You're excluding a whole entire nation of people based on their religion. And that like stuck with me. I was like, huh. And then as fate would have it, I actually met my now husband of 22 years the first day I arrived. So it was really part of my destiny.
He had a premonition. That's probably why it was even more funny to him. Like, you'll see.
Yeah, when he saw me when I came back for my annual visit later that year, he mocked me. He was like, see, I told you.
I would have totally done the same thing.
But,
I'd have been like, this is Grumpy Bear. I'd have been like, told you so.
yeah, so I do a lot of educating. Like I go out to schools and workplaces and teach about Islam to demystify is the word I use a lot. Like you have all these ideas about Muslims, you're absolutely wrong. And one of the things that I've started to tell people, because there's an assumption a lot of times when people see white Muslim women that somehow they're under that oppressive umbrella that Muslim women are under. There's this perception that all Muslim women are oppressed, and if I'm dressing like this, it's because my husband's making me, and I don't have any autonomy.
Are they trying to save you?
No, see, it's really interesting. My experience of it is that, it would be nicer if people were trying to save us. It feels more like people are like, you're so far gone down the path of being oppressed, you don't even know it, and you're beyond saving. Like that's kind of the feel I get. So, so the assumption a lot of times when people see that I'm like dressed like this, it's somehow that, I met my husband, I married my husband, he made me do this. But in truth, I was, I had already fallen in love with Egypt before I even got there. And then I had this very negative media induced, not even media, like education system induced impression about what Islam was. And then I was meeting my husband and meeting his family and meeting his friends. And so it's like I had a trifecta love affair of falling in love with the country, falling in love with Islam, and falling in love with my husband. And when it came to the time to decide to get married, I just felt like it was very fate kind of ordained that we had ended up in this spot. So I decided to convert in that moment so that I could get married in a mosque. So at first I was like, tell me what I need to do and say so I can get married in a mosque, because God had a part in this and I don't want to exclude him from the process of us getting married. And then I had like 8 years of really like, oh, what did I sign up for? So, and then once I figured that out,
don't just fast forward. There's some juiciness right there. I have curiosities. So you converted out of your romantic love, and I'm gonna just say romantic love for Egypt, the culture, the freedom, the it's weird, it's odd. So for the perception to be a oppressive culture, for you, it was almost liberating since you had this deep inner calling since you were a child. And because you had that lived experience of that deep inner calling, and then you meet your husband, it was like, oh, I'm just supposed to, so I'm going to do that, since you're already an open-minded hippy-dippy person.
Exactly.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand, because you can't, kind of gloss. I know it's your life, but
right. But I mean, so in that year, there was a year between the day that I arrived there and the day that I did what's called taking Shahada, which is making the promise. And I kind of looked at what was on that list. So I was like, well, lightning won't strike if I say these things, like I'll be fine. I was raised in Christianity. I grew up in the Episcopal Church, and somewhere in college, like it just stopped feeling like a fit for me. So in the whole decade of my 20s, I was really researching, had lots of friends who were Orthodox Jews. I looked into Buddhism. I was out in the Pacific Northwest, so I looked at Native American spirituality. I looked at neo-paganism. I was looking at all the different faiths, waiting for one to call me. Nothing was. I had already rejected Islam, didn't think that I was going to look at that. And then my heart really opened up to it like my first night, which is amazing. For anyone who's been to a Muslim country, there are calls to prayer that happen 5 times a day, and the first one happens before the sun goes up. And I heard it, and it's from everywhere. You know how in towns where there are churches everywhere, you hear church bells. It's just like coming from every direction from megaphones. And my first thought was I was terrified, because if there was that amount of noise here in this country, it would be in like nuclear bomb, take shelter. So I sat up in bed in the hotel room and my heart was beating. And then there was just this moment where it's like it shifted, and it was like, oh, I need to know what that says. Like it felt more beautiful than anything I had ever heard before. My heart cracked open, my soul cracked open. And so I spent a year really looking at, what the call to prayer was saying, what that meant in the call to prayer, and then learning the traditions of the people, which, having looked at all the Native American traditions and everything that are very focused on like nature and appreciating nature around us, all the prayers are focused around where the sun is in the sky, and all the months are all organized about where the moon is in the sky. And um, there's 1 month of fasting every year that you just fast for a month with all the people, and it just felt so healthy. And so yeah, all of the traditions really called me. So when it came to the point, I was like, okay, I've fallen in love with this man and I'm going to marry him. I want to bring that with me into this experience. And so I got married in an 1100-year-old mosque in the center of Cairo. It was pretty cool.
That sounds beautiful. So I I'm not, I do not practice Islam. However, I had a spiritual awakening, and I felt like I would hear, the way I described it without having the language was like I hear drums in my head like Jumanji, and I was following the call of the drums, and it led me to study African traditional religions. But even separate from that study of African traditional religions, which they light me up, like you say, like you described Islam
Yeah.
lighting you up. So like there's this reverence that I have for your experience, because even though the data, like the subject matter is different, the process is the same. And in my experience, I remember when I was like figuring like, whoa, what's happening to me? Because I was just like sitting in my living room in silence, and then all of us, whoa, there was this life altering moment, and I've never been the same since. And so it was like, what's happening to me? And I was meditating, and like then I was learning how to set intention and feeling like my energy and my emotional energy in my body change and all this different stuff. And so it made me appreciate the traditions and the
Yeah.
like a different religion. So like when you mentioned the call to prayer and praying 5 times a day, when I was figuring out what was happening to me, I was addicted to prayer. Like I was addicted to sitting down and setting intention. And so like I was like, oh, I get why that, like there was this, I ain't gonna lie, I had some disrespectful views. I was indoctrinated. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I get the prayers of 5 times a day. And then like even my hair is covered now. This wasn't because I had a call and I was just trying to match my dress. But I have times where when I'm leaving the house, I have to cover my head. And in my tradition, I have to cover my head during certain, like after certain rituals or certain things, because I have to protect my crown.
Right.
There is this deep respect. So, like when I look at your, though I wouldn't want to cover my head all the time, and when I talk to a lot of Muslim women, like I hear that's a personal choice. Is it?
Yes. Yes, it
Um,
is.
and so, but I get the things that were scary to me about Islam. I, because I had my own spiritual experiences, I understood that they were like why they were important as a part of a religious system. And I will say this, I appreciate that about my own spirit. Like it wasn't assigned to a religion, but because it happened outside of a religion, when I look at religions, I just look for the spiritual truth that I know. And so like there's a reverence for
Yes.
them rather. Now some of them I'm disrespectful to. I'm a human. I'm working on my shade.
Yes. Yes.
But a lot of them I'm like, wow, this is a I yes, let me be endeared by your tradition. I have such reverence for it. Um,
Right.
let me cheer it on.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I feel like with spirituality, like all, what was this that I read? Carolyn Meese had said that if you think about religion, like you're sitting in the center of a clock and you look at all the different religions, Hinduism's here, Christianity's here, Islam is here, like the center, the core, the essence, like the sacred spirituality piece of it is the same. I mean, if you get rid of all the stuff, the dogma, For me, I hadn't yet found a place where the dogma served me or the rituals served me. And when I came to Islam, I was like, oh, this fits. Um, I had spent a couple of years before I ended up going to Egypt. I used to have an altar and I would read tarot cards and I'd light a candle and do all of that. And I would always cover my head. Like I never thought about it. It felt like what I needed to do. And then as soon as I became Muslim, I'm like, I'm never putting one of those things on my head. Like all my resistance came up. And then 8 years later, it was just like, I literally woke up one morning. I'm like, that's the next step. Like, that's what I have to do. And I felt more empowered having this on my head, despite prejudice on the outside. Like, I just feel like when on a good day, when I'm putting this on my head, I remember that my relationship to spirit is the highest priority. My relationship to the creator, to God, is the highest priority. And it just, I feel safe. Hijab, the word hijab literally means protection. And so.
Isn't it interesting? Well, isn't it, I don't have the right word, so I'm gonna just say what I'm gonna say.
You say what you have to say.
Ain't it fucked up that people are so in their judgment that they are looking at something you find beauty in as a person who has deep, like I have deep connection to my spiritual practices. So like I understand when it's something that is special to you in that way. So you find beauty in, and this liberating because you have the freedom to practice your spiritual truth, which as a spiritual being who's aware of being a spiritual being, that's who you really are. That's your real authenticity.
Right.
And then people look on it and say, let me decide my oppression, please.
Right.
And this is but get off my back.
Right. Right. So as you're talking, like you see and you honor each person's spirituality. For me, it feels like true equity and justice work, because I do that kind of across, I do a lot of education about Islam to demystify and make it safer here for Muslims. But also there's just this piece of like, if you truly believe that we're all like spiritual beings having a human experience, then we look at each other differently. It's like I look into your eyes and I see your soul, and you look into my eyes and you see my soul. And this is all just window dressing.
And then it makes me hear your story from, it's a reverential creation type story, because it is, so when you live the spiritual life, it is yours individually. It is an experiential thing through your own individual perceptions. But it is a co-creation.
Yes.
And so when I get to look into your eyes and hear other people who are aware of their spiritual journeys, it is like I'm hearing and listening into the creation, like into your own individual creation story, which is sacred in and of itself.
Yes. Yes.
That is woo. So I've been having some moments today, Wendy. I was teaching about Kwanzaa earlier, and I'm learning about Kwanzaa because I felt called to practice a holiday that I didn't really want any colonization. And I do practice in my religions, but I just kind of want, like I'm decorating the Kwanzaa tree and all that. But I was talking in a group where I do Get Woke Wednesdays, and I was talking about Harriet Tubman and how she used to pass out and that's how she did the Underground Railroad. She would pass out and get premonitions, and that's how she knew what to do. And then
I didn't know that.
I learned it after I had my awakening. You're gonna send me into tears again, Wendy.
Oh.
And so it made me, yep, it's happening. It made me, from this perspective, look at me, and even now I'm about to have it again. I'm sitting here on my comfy couch with my Care Bears in my house that I own, on my own YouTube platform, discussing with a white woman anti-Muslim discrimination and living in my liberated self.
Mm-hmm.
And the level of it's so much easier, I would imagine, for me to be my authentic self than it was for her. And she did it anyway. and she blazed a trail. And so it gives me hope and optimism. And I feel that call as I do this work. Like she's a hero, and especially because I found out she communes with the world the way that I do.
Yeah.
You see how I'm even talking about her in present tense? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. That's so powerful.
it is a
Yeah,
moment.
I mean, there's this whole layer of spiritual knowing that I think our society is largely unplugged from. And it's so powerful to hear people who have just been able to tune in, listen to that, or accept it. Like Muhammad is the prophet of Islam. So Muhammad is a prophet in the line of all the other prophets. The reason I'm telling you that, all the other prophets of Christianity, Adam, Moses, Jesus, everybody. But when he would receive revelation, people said that he would faint and he would experience it and say that he felt like he was hearing bells, like just really, really, really loud bells. And then he was an illiterate human being and he would come out with this amazingly divine, gorgeous, poetic language to teach people things about how to be good humans and how to honor God. So I was like, wow, Harriet Tubman had some of that. That's
And
amazing.
even when you just described that story, I felt like I saw myself in that, and like that is exactly how I can't create anything without sitting down
Mm.
and allowing myself to receive what I know. I like, but I'm walking in my purpose that was given to me or made that I was made aware when I had my spiritual awakening. Like I am doing this with you today because I had that experience then.
Right.
And it told me, it was like, I don't know how to explain it because, well, you're a spiritual, you probably had your own spiritual experiences. So like you understand, you just get inundated with this knowledge and then
Right.
you have to sort it out and live the experience.
Right.
And that's what, and I am living the experience, which makes me even more excited for what's to come
Yeah.
because there was more.
Yeah. Well, it's like this work, there's this body of work. This is the way I think about it. There's this body of work, and then there's our individual selves, and the work has like sort of chosen us, in this divine assignment. It's like, okay, here's the work, here I am. And then we get to sort of negotiate with the work. It's like, okay, what can I show up for? What can I not show up for? Right?
Yes, that it, because it's like there, it's kind of, I was sitting on my couch and then all of a sudden something happened to me that I could not, like if they made me an offer, I couldn't refuse.
Right.
And then it's kind of, well, what do I do with this? And
Right.
you either run with it or you don't, but running with it felt better. So why would, it's kind of like there, and then
Right.
you go through the journey, right? Like they hook you. So like the
Oh, yeah.
bliss gets you hooked.
Yes.
And then there's like, okay, now you know what's possible. Let's unpack and give you your purpose and also build you for your purpose and work out. Oh, yeah, let's take out some of that shit. Oh, you're kind of toxic in that way. See yourself and let it be removed. And
Right.
then now you're ready to be on YouTube.
Yes. With your Care Bears.
Yeah. Um, man.
Yeah. So can I tell you a little bit more of
Yeah, I'm
where
sorry. I am, you can just
no, no, no.
get
This isn't
my
about
heart.
it. This isn't about Islam, but this is a piece like why I'm showing up for conversations like this. And I've been doing a course called Healing the Spiritual Divide with my colleague that you had a chance to be on our podcast, Christopher
Mhm.
Johnson.
Let's
Um,
cheer them on, y'all. Wendy send me the links. We'll put them in the comments.
okay,
Cheer their
awesome.
stuff. Cheer
Yeah.
their stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome stuff. But so I'm from Rhode Island. I live in Rhode Island, and we are one of the original 13 colonies. And in tracing my own ancestry, I've found that my family were not only some of the original colonists, so we have all sorts of healing to do around what happened to the indigenous communities. My ancestors were actively involved in the slave trade in Rhode Island, and the slave trade here in Rhode Island was the epicenter of the slave trade for a period of time in the 1700s. So, and now the community that Bristol, Rhode Island, where my family colonized, is trying to do a lot of anti-racism work. And there's a lot of potential for healing. And feeling my throat kind of choking up even saying this. It's like, we are living now as a society the consequences of 400 years of colonialism, and we need to heal it. And people like me, so I've got this veil on and I show up as a white Muslim, but then I can't veil my colonial roots, and I can't look away from what colonialism has done to our society and to entire nations of people. And so
Can you tell the other white people they can't look away either?
that's what I'm trying to do.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Let's cheer that on.
Yeah, yeah. So, and in fact, we had Christopher Johnson and I had an amazing workshop this morning. We had 13 white folks in there who were showing up for the conversation. And I
13,
know
like
you're doing
13
that as well.
colonies.
Yeah, like the 13 colonies, right? I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, so I feel like it's in my DNA to show up at this point in history. You know, that's where I got my over the last couple of years, like, get ready, get ready. It just felt like, get ready, something big's coming, something's big coming, and there's still even bigger coming. But preparing more people to be ready to face the challenges head on. Like, we can't look away anymore. We can't look away.
And and here's the thing, Wendy, what if we all just turned to what was challenging and let it not be a challenge? It does, like, the big things could just be big shifts that we're working together to achieve if we could stop fighting so much.
It could be.
Like, what if we agreed to feel differently, but build the things we have in, like, common desires?
Yeah. And I know that's what you're doing with folks in your group. You told me I could ask you a question. Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
At the
I don't
end.
know how long we've been going, but that is usually how we
Okay.
close. Even though I didn't do such a good job so far, I try.
Okay.
My intention is to make it more about you. I just got so enthralled in the parallel of the story.
But I mean, how great is it to have two people who look visually as different as we do, to be able to be in a conversation together and agree on the most fundamental premise of what makes us human? Like that, I think it's important that people get to hear both of us to hear that.
Agree. And even I find tremendous value in you owning the ugliness of your ancestral lineage and then seeing a healing of the effect of that being a part of your journey. Like, I find, like, I'm proud, I say thank you, I have warmth and admiration for it, because as a person I'm a Black woman and I've been doing my own ancestral work. And though I haven't gone as far into enslavement, I did trace my maternal lineage to Louisiana. And then I found out while teaching my course, the Actively Authentic Allyship, that cohort, I found out in one of the cohorts that there was a massacre in the town that they lived in that I saw on the census records around the time that they started moving north. So, like, I live in Detroit, Michigan because I'm a product of the Great Migration. And it was interesting to see myself in this. And so, like, but when I was teaching about that and finding out there was a massacre there, that was some rage I had to process. And I teach the cohort, like, we do an ancestral practice in there because I understand that there needs to be healing and I want people to connect. So it's inspirational to see you claim the ugliness and still be doing the healing.
Yeah. Yeah. I had an interesting Thanksgiving this year, having like every year an increasing level of awareness, and you know, thinking about the women who's, you know, I always think about sort of the intergenerational lineage of wombs, right? So I'm imagining that
Me too.
there was a woman, right, who chose to come here not having any idea what the impact was going to be on a global scale, right? Because the people who came here at the beginning were trying to escape religious persecution themselves. So I have a fantasy about going to the Daughters of the American Revolution meeting dressed like this one day. I asked my sister to come with me, but she doesn't want to do that. But
I go with
anyway,
you.
anyway, but I was trying to connect. I always try to connect to like all different sides of the story. And I'm thinking that original, however many people who came over on those little tiny ships weren't imagining the destruction that was going to happen over the generations, yet that happened. So I'm like trying to have honor and grace for the wombs, the generations of wombs, and then also have like a complete intolerance for where it has ended up going.
So when I look at it from my higher perspective and not my Black human perspective, and sometimes like my higher self and my Black human self, they be at odds. But when I look at it, like, so they weren't trauma informed,
Yeah.
right? Like, so humans have been working the way humans work. Our understanding of ourselves as a species is just what's emerging and growing as a collective species on the globe. So if they're escaping religious persecution, they're traumatized people looking to be empowered and doing and re-traumatize. And like, so there is like, I had to learn to, because of my own trauma, some of the ways that I was toxic and callous and hurtful. And even something happened with one of my team, like someone on my team where we were laughing and joking and I said something harsh, but it was a sensitive topic. I said it was, but it's the subtle harsh that has too much of a ring of a truth and says so and I felt incredibly apologetic. We both cried like there, but
Are you able to hear that vacuum?
a little bit, yeah.
Oh, all right, I'm going to hold this like this and hope that, is that better?
No, you don't have to hold it. It didn't change it at all.
Okay,
It's
sorry.
no worries. And so, um, shoot, I lost track of what I was saying. Oh well. Sorry, y'all. That happens sometimes. I
I'm
guess.
sorry. You apologized ahead of time that you might have some construction noise. I neglected to say that I also have some construction noise in
Oh
my house. So hopefully he'll be finished with that in just a second. So
no, no worries.
you were okay. We lost the thread
We lost
anyhow.
it. It happens, y'all. Listen,
Yes.
comfy couch conversation. So in reality, let me tell you how the comfy couch conversation came to be. I was wanting to start a YouTube channel, not to really have like a direction, but I was exhausted and I had scheduled a recording and I was just like, I don't have it today. They're gonna get these pajamas and I'm gonna sit right here on my couch. And so I put on my pajamas and I sat with my Care Bears because they were making me so happy at the time. And we recorded like this, and then I was just being my animated, and I was like, oh, this is comfy couch conversations. So, because I can't do it. We just can't do it all. And sometimes we have to do what we can, how we can.
Right. And self-care is super important. Like we need to be able to plug in and unplug when we need to, like not go into denial, but we can't give from empty cups. And so we need to continue to, if sitting on the couch having a conversation is what we need. I do all my meetings here on the couch. I'm like, this is what I need.
If you saw what's behind you, you would see it's my office.
That's awesome.
Meaning behind the computer. So I want to ask you some, and switch a little bit to your work. If I'm wanting to be an ally or an anti-Muslim so it's anti-racist, anti-Muslim discriminationist, or what I call myself.
Yeah, that's what
I want to be an ally against Muslim. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
And I think y'all do too. So we're gonna just leave it there. What are some things that I need to know or what are common myths, or if you could, quick tips, just something to add a little safety for for people who are Muslim
Yeah,
in the
I
world.
mean, I think it's easy to discriminate against Muslims in the United States because we only represent about 1% of the population. So being an American person and wandering around, you might not run into Muslims, especially if you don't live in an urban area. So you might not have an opportunity to know
Let's
Muslims.
say
And
I have
so,
Dearborn, and it is like Dearborn, Michigan. It's like, so the idea
yes,
of not seeing a Muslim person, I was in my mind, in my head, I'm like, what?
right. Yeah, so you have Deerfield, and you have the epicenter of Muslim immigrants and white American Muslims and Sufi
And they're like
community, and
15 minutes. Like Dearborn Heights is actually like down the block.
yeah. So you don't have the normal experience. You have a lot of people in your area, but Islam is the second largest practiced religion in the world next to Christianity, and there are 1.8 billion people who practice it, and there are 53 Muslim majority countries. So lots and lots of Muslims. And so there's a perception that Muslims are dangerous people. But if that were true, we wouldn't be here because there are 1.8 billion of us and we come from all over the world. And so my experience of
That's
stepping into,
almost 2/7 of the world, y'all. That's
right,
almost 2/7.
yeah, it's a lot of people. Um, so my experience of becoming Muslim, suddenly the people that I spent time with, the people I celebrate holidays with, the people I go to pray with, are from all over the world. And I have friends from every continent in the world who practice Islam. And so just some basic knowledge. I have an ebook I'll give you the link to. I wrote an ebook called Demystifying Ramadan, and it's about the holy month where we fast. And it's just like a little short, quick 20-minute read primer of Islam. Um, I think just,
Is
sorry
Eid
about
the
that.
celebration at the end of Ramadan?
I'm sorry, what?
Is Eid the celebration at the end of Ramadan?
Yes,
I've been
yes.
to an Eid
You
celebration
have.
before. It was so
Yeah.
fun, and they wrapped me in a sari. Because I had a sari because someone brought me one back from London, one of my coworkers, and I put it on and it was terrible. And so the women, they took me into the bedroom and they doctored me up. And then I got to go from house to house as the family had a lot of houses in the same neighborhood. And I tried a lot of different food, and I tried something called fun. And then I didn't like with people, they're like, the grandmother didn't speak English. And when I tasted the fun, it was horrible. Um, but I just like I had to I didn't want to be rude and she speak English, and so it was like a whole thing, but it was burning my mouth.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, like it was. Isn't fine like a tobacco leaf or something?
I don't know. That's not a food
Oh,
I'm familiar with,
okay,
actually. So it might have been cultural, not
yeah,
religious food. So,
but it was something, and it burned. It was like this leaf that you chew on that
uh,
is like a thing, and it burned, and how it was funny.
oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So, I think I would encourage people. I do a lot of just getting up in front of people and saying things like, "Have you ever met anyone dressed like me?" And most of the time, the room full of people, no one has. And then we talk about what their assumptions and biases are because I can take it, and the things they believe about me. So I'm not surprised anymore. And I just think Muslims are very friendly people in general. Now there are exceptions. There are terrorist groups, but there are also white supremacy groups. So you can't single out an entire religion, but we have to realize since September 11th, we've been indoctrinated by the media to believe one set of things about Muslims that is very, very skewed, and a lot of the
I
terminology
feel
that
like
we
it
hold.
started with the Gulf War. Because I can remember in the 90s and with like Iraq, and we had these
Right.
yellow ribbons on trees and stuff like that with Bush.
Yeah, and it even goes back to, what we learn in Western Civ class in high school. It's a very Eurocentric, the white Europeans are good, the Muslims were bad, and the whole version of the story we were told is skewed. So we're really indoctrinated from a very early age to think negative things about Muslims. So one, don't assume when you see a woman with a hijab that she's oppressed and miserable and uneducated and her husband controls her finances and she can't work and she's not educated. All those different things that go through your head. Get curious about your own thinking, I think, is what I encourage people to do the most. Get curious, like, what is that true? Maybe it is what you're thinking, but most of the time it's not. It's just some sort of internalized bias or prejudice that you've been spoon fed. Well, it's COVID now, but most mosques have open houses, or you can come to the Eid celebration like you said you did. And there are lots of opportunities to get to know people and their traditions and learn. So I just encourage people to open their minds and hearts to learning something different than what they might have expected. And hopefully just listening to us today, that's already happened.
I hope so, because you are very interesting and I've enjoyed talking to you about your story and your work. And I feel even more endeared to you than I did when we spoke before.
Thank you.
So, I hope that, I lead with compassion. But I have had my own biases. I had a bias against Arab men that sometimes would conflate into anti-Muslim thinking. But the reason I had that is because I had experiences in my neighborhood in the liquor store that was owned by an Arab man, or at least that was who was behind the counter. And then when I was a cocktail waitress at the casino, I'm dressed very scantily, super
Yeah.
short, so there was a lot of objectification that I experienced. But it wasn't just Muslim men, it's just that was my experience
Right.
that I had with Muslim men. So I had this, and it was only the men, not the women.
Right.
And I would
Interesting.
like transpose that patriarchal effect to my
Right.
belief. But then they brought in we had a diversity education program come in. I can't remember what it was called. But it was this 2-day experience, and they put so it was they wanted to make a cultural shift. So they put the senior management and then middle management had to go through it during these, and then then everybody else. And so then all the hourly employees. I went through it in management. It's 2 days, and I owned which this was just diversity training in corporate America. I don't know, because I can not believe now at this age that I owned my bias publicly in front of my coworkers, but I did. I've always been an authentic person. And there was a man named Jamal who took the time to come to me during the lunch break. And he told me his story. And his story was nothing like all of the things I assumed. Now, I'll say this, Fadi, I sat down and talked to Fadi, and Fadi was like, "You're right. Everything you think is true. I don't know what to tell you." And he was kind of douchey generally, like working with him anyway. And then Jamal was like, "Let me tell you my story." And he was a first generation immigrant who married a white woman who was madly in love with her. And he was always such a gentleman. And dude was fine. Okay, like fine. And but always a gentleman, devoted, father of 3 daughters, like nothing like all the stereotypes. And he changed. He opened, like, for me, once I see. You can't unknow it. No. And
Right.
so then then I had a coworker, Sue. He was like a work buddy. We were sales teammates, and he invited me to dinner at his house. I didn't quite make it because I quit the job before that separately, but we would go to lunch, but it was all just like fun and activity. But I had to be willing to open
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah. So let me tell you about my most exciting thing that I do. I, this past March, before COVID shut the world down, I did a Sacred Gifts of Egypt tour. And I brought a group of women, and we, of course, went to see all the amazing things that I imagined seeing when I went to Egypt, the hieroglyphics and the temples and all of that. But then we also did some immersion in the culture and learning about Muslim people in Muslim people's homes and just getting to know each other. And it was the best way to dispel stereotypes. Like, we're breaking bread with people in their homes, in their villages, and it's pretty magical. And I have another one planned for next year, and it's called Sacred Self and Sacred Sites. And we're going to go through the history of religion. Yeah. So happy. Yeah, so it's all Cairo based, and in Cairo we have the pyramids and, you know, all of that, beginnings of civilization. We also have architecture dedicated to Jewish worship. We have old Coptic Christian worship. We have some of the first Islamic institutions, and we're going to do a lot of personal reflection on our most sacred self in this sort of historical context of humans trying to find God. Basically, it's how have humans tried to find God for the last 5,000 years? And then we also dispel all sorts of myths about Islam while we're there. So pretty awesome.
That sounds pretty awesome, y'all. You see this? So y'all know about Cheer Bear's hip roll, but Cheer Bear has to roll his hips to that one. Or her hips. I'm not really sure what Cheer Bears or their hips.
Their hips, maybe.
So yeah, Cheer Bears rolling their hips. Roll. See, okay. Sorry. That sounds amazing.
Twerking for sacred sites.
Yeah. So I do wellness the ratchet way, Wendy, and I twerk on my yoga ball because I'm still working on the weight on top of my knees.
There you go.
Yeah, so I twerk on my yoga ball to loosen up my lower back.
That's
and
awesome.
It feels good, and then I'll be feeling sexy and sensual when I do it by myself.
There you go.
So I suppose, although I'm nervous because you're such a naturally curious person, Wendy, this is a time where you get to ask Alexis a question that I don't know and I'm not prepared for. And I will answer it. And I'll answer it, or I'll say I don't want to answer it.
Okay.
But I will consider fully.
Since you have already talked about it, I don't think you're going to say no. So I'm curious about you when you talk about your spiritual awakening and your connection to sort of African spiritual practices and Kwanzaa. I know that that's becoming more in the vernacular in our society. So I don't know a lot about it, and I would love you to tell me what it means to you and how you're practicing it and how.
Good. Let me go get my notes. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay. So how I got to practice Kwanzaa, because Kwanzaa is not necessarily a religious belief. And it is a holiday that was created by Dr. Maulana Karenga, professor and chairman of Black Studies at California State University, in Long Beach, 1966, after the Watts riots. And I have heard of Kwanzaa several times, and I've heard the principles enough, like that when I hear, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a Kwanzaa principle. But this year, I ran to get the notes, so I'm catching my breath. This year, I was actually having holiday spirit. Now, I have canceled Christmas before, where like, it's just, when I cancel it, nobody gets a gift, it's just a regular, it's canceled. Like you cancel a calendar invite, it is canceled. Because I never really gelled with, like, I'm not sure what Christmas is, but I like when I gather with people and I want to eat good food and I want to have celebration. And now that I have sacred reverence, I want to have that kind of experience too. And so when I was I'm like, okay, but I'm also Black and I want to reclaim my Blackness, because that was something that was active. Like, I was craving Blackness, like people crave pickles and peanut butter. I was like when they're pregnant or you crave a food you want, I was craving Blackness. And not that and I live a Black experience. So it's not like I'm not I didn't feel separate from my Black identity, but now I realized I was craving connection with my ancestors.
Mm.
Um, and so this year I wanted to celebrate I wanted to celebrate the holidays, but I'm like, man, forget Christmas and I don't want the colonization. And so I'm like, I'm gonna celebrate Kwanzaa. But then uh, growing up in US American culture, Christmas is kind of like, if you don't practice a spiritual system or a religion, Christmas is the thing you do.
Right.
So like I missed my tree and all that stuff. So I'm making a Kwanzaa tree and it is Black. It like it's the tree itself is Black, and then I'm gonna decorate it with red and green bulbs for the Pan-African colors, and I'm gonna top it with her.
Oh, pretty. Oh,
And
wow.
so I made her myself, and I'm gonna put her atop my tree, and you see how she has Black, red, and green bulbs in her hair.
Yep. And a
And then this is
cardinal.
cardboard, but I bought some more stuff to make it less like have that less of a corrugated look.
Yeah.
So I can cover it. But then and I wrapped the fabric around. And I was trying to make it as a wreath for my door, but it's so thick that it
Uh,
wouldn't close. So it'll be my tree topper for my Kwanzaa tree.
pretty.
And I'm making kente cloth bulbs to go on there too. So why I wanted to and what I'm doing, because that's the part of mourning my US American Christmas experience.
Yes.
And then we have a Kanara. Would you like to see that?
Yes, absolutely.
And let me go grab it because I bought one. And I'm going to teach more in depth on my page and on here. So there'll be like a Kwanzaa lesson. Although
Nice.
It won't be like when I practice, I'm gonna practice by myself. I'm not practicing publicly.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the Kanara, and you see the candles are green, Black, and red. And it lasts for 7 days. And every day a child lights the candle and a different principle is discussed. And there's food and celebration. And then I bought a mat because this is bamboo mat. Because you celebrate, like that represents the ancestors, and that we are standing on the shoulders of those before us. And that is the fabric of history. And then this is the unity cup. And I can't quite remember the unity cup, but I bought a whole bunch of these because of COVID.
Yeah. Don't want too much unity.
And so then I will discuss I'll tell you about the 7 principles. And we won't go into the 7 symbols because I don't have pictures of them. And I'm going to go into that when I teach my lesson. But the 7 principles, and each day is a different principle, starting December 26th, going to January 1st. So Umoja, which I'm looking at my phonetic pronunciations. Umoja is unity, which is unity of the family, community, nation, and race. The next principle is Kujichagulia, which is self-determination, being responsible for your own conduct and behavior. Then there's Ujima, which is collective work and responsibility, working to help each other and in the community. And then there is Ujima, which is cooperative economics, working to build shops and businesses. And then there's Nia, which is purpose, remembering and restoring African and African American cultures, customs, and history. And then there's Kuumba, which is creativity, creating and using your imagination to make communities better. And then it ends with Imani, which is faith, believing in people, families, leaders, teachers, and the righteous of the African American struggle. And so for me, when I read it, and then like I wanted to celebrate it before, but in my craving of celebrating it, I get to have everything I want and no colonization.
Yeah.
Even the principles are Swahili, the language.
Yeah. And both Nia and Amani are also Arabic Muslim terms for faith and intention. Nia is intention and Iman is faith. So that's awesome. That's awesome to hear the intersection of those. Oh, thank you. See, I
Well,
knew you'd be willing to answer that question.
absolutely, my pleasure. I got up, and then there are 7 symbols too, and um, yeah, these are way too long of explanations.
So
And
you'll be teaching about them here on your
yeah,
YouTube channel, though. Oh,
so
good. I can't wait
on
to
my
follow.
YouTube, and I'm gonna send it on my Facebook, but I'm gonna just post the YouTube stuff. I'm working on figuring out how to do clips so I can like put a clip and then have the whole thing to send it to YouTube. Someone on my team said I'm supposed to do that.
Yes.
Um, and so, but yeah, but I'm going to teach about it before December 26th. And then I'm going to make sure to teach, like, even though you may appreciate this is not a holiday for you to celebrate yourself if you are not Black,
Right.
because it's specifically created as a Black holiday to help restore culture to the Black
Right.
US American experience. You can have appreciation for it, you can learn about it, but you should not have the experiential knowledge.
Interesting.
Um,
Awesome.
and so, yeah, that is what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to celebrate it myself because I just don't, I want to experience it before I share my experience.
Yeah. Oh, great. I look forward to following that. That's great.
Thank you. And I definitely want to follow all that you do. I love when I get to commune with fellow world builders. And I'm sure we'll be working together in the future and doing different things. So
Yeah.
good catching up with you, Wendy.
Yeah. Really great to catch up with you too. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you for coming, and we have loved you on the comfy couch. And I have lost Cheer Bear, which means it's likely that I'm on top of them. Um, and so all of us, this is Grumpy Bear, always with his back turned. Um, okay, we're gonna have to bid you all adieu. Remember, like, subscribe, and share. And if when you send me the ebook or whatever you want, I will put it in the comments. And thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to say to the Comfy Couch audience? Or
No,
ask my
thank you for
audience?
listening. Yeah.
Hmm?
No, just thank you for listening. I was really excited to be here today.
Thank you so much.
Good conversation.
Yes. Oh no.